Hi all, and thanks for being with me. Going to talk today about a subject that I think concerns all of us, a subject, I guess, that keeps us awake at night. Just wondering, just wondering when it is we can eventually go nuclear. So the debate is on, and the interesting thing about this debate around nuclear is that the coalition have been debating this amongst themselves for quite some time, and they've been sort of enticing us to wonder what it is they're going to come up with that's just going to be so remarkable that it's going to solve all our energy problems in one foul swoop. It's going to have an impact on our communities as of tomorrow. Tomorrow, everybody, now once it has been released, will understand completely how nuclear is the way that we should go. And come an election next year, Dutton and his crew of cronies will clearly make their way into Parliament House as the government. So I don't believe that will happen. But nevertheless, who knows in this very fragile state of politics that we live in. But what I am concerned about is whether or not enough people are paying attention. This is the question. Do people really care that much? Now, we all care. I care about our power usage. I mean, I do have solar. I do have a battery. And it does save us some money, and we send a lot of our power back to the grid. So, in a sense, I've invested in making a contribution to our energy grid. Now, the question too that remains for me is that under Dutton, would that be a threat? Well, probably not for me personally, because by the time this is all implemented, I'll probably be dead. So, but will it impact my family and my kids and the future Australians out there yet to be born? Yes, I think it will. And so we need to find a way to understand, I guess, what is happening here. Now, for those of you that didn't see, I'm not going to play it for you today anyway, but anyone who saw Dutton's release, it lacked energy. It really did. It was pathetic. It was almost like Dutton didn't believe himself in what he was saying, but this is the only lever he can pull in order to get some traction at the next election. He can't continue talking about how terrible the cost of living is. He can't talk about how all we're suffering, even though that's relevant. I think it's probably worth talking about, but he has nothing to replace it. There is nothing. Someone show me something that Dutton has said or done that would indicate that he understands the cost of living crisis, and he has a solution for that apart from this attack on energy, a proposal that will take longer than 10 years to establish, to build, and be completely ineffective. So got a little bit of a video here from my favourite Liberal Party network that talks just generally about this. There's one aspect of this that fascinates me in terms of what Dutton talked about during his press release, and it's become this nagging topic for me. So I'll bring you this and talk about it on the other side, I think.
Well, Australians now have a very clear choice when we go to the polls in 2025. Do we want to access and use all of the mineral wealth we have at our disposal in Australia, or do we want to please the rest of the world and become the canary in the coal mine, forgive the awful pun, and attempt to become the only nation on earth to run a major manufacturing economy on sun and wind? As of mid-morning today, that is the choice voters now have to make. Opposition leader Peter Dutton is taking the biggest electoral risk in history, even outdoing, I believe, John Howard taking a GST to the voters in an election with his ambitious, expensive national building promise to run the country on a combination of nuclear energy and renewables with some solar and gas as backup. Here was Peter Dutton outlining the independent analysis done for his ambitious nuclear plans earlier today.
This is a plan which will underpin the economic success of our country for the next century. This will make electricity reliable, it'll make it more consistent, it'll make it cheaper for Australians, and it will help us decarbonise.
Can I just add that it doesn't solve a problem right now. This is a decade down the track. So I would want to hear from the coalition, if they're going to present any arguments around the energy crisis, is for them to tell us how, if they win power next year, what is it that they're going to do that is going to be significantly different?
Carbonise as a trading economy as we must. We have independent costings which provide that validation.
Well, as you'd expect, reaction was pretty immediate, with the usual suspects disagreeing. The Greens leader Adam Bandt and Labor's reaction from Chris Bowen.
Today, Peter Dutton has delivered a Christmas con job. Peter Dutton wants you to believe that he can introduce the most expensive form of energy and somehow that will reduce power prices.
Peter Dutton's nuclear delusion is a dangerous con job. It's a cover-up for more coal and it's a threat to people's safety.
Very interesting that it was not the Prime Minister himself, Anthony Albanese, who came out reacting today, but instead he shoved Chris Bowen out there.
I love the way every opportunity they can, they have a shot at Albo. They just can't let it go.
And Bowen was pretty pathetic. Peter Dutton and his energy spokesman...
No, I'm sorry. Peter Dutton was the one who was pathetic. He was wishy-washy. He lacked confidence. He was a bit of a disgrace, I thought, in terms of the energy levels, who's the pun, that he exhibited when doing his presser.
O'Brien made the point over and over that in signing up to the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal, Australia has already put its hand up as a nation to run nuclear operations in Australia.
Now, this is the point. Now, I don't know how many times Dutton talked about this during his presser, but I would hasten to add it was 6 or 7. And so the issue becomes, okay, we have nuclear power plants. No, we don't. We have nuclear implanted in our, or will be implanted in our submarines. And there was this reference to the fact, I think it was Price that makes this reference to Malinauskas, the South Australian Premier, that he must love this idea. He loves nuclear because nuclear is powering the submarines which will be built at Osborne here in South Australia. So he must be all for it. Look, I just need to say that this is crap, that the relationship between nuclear that's used, look, look, I'm not a scientist, so there's probably some people out there who are far more knowledgeable than this than I am. And I'm sure that people in my comment will tell me so, because they do. And I appreciate your comment, but if you be rude, I will just unsubscribe you or get rid of you some way. So, but the interesting thing is, it's a bit like if you take a AAA battery and you compare the AAA battery with the battery that's in my garage that stores fuel or power for my home. So it would be, the two are incomparable. They're not. They're not the same. And to make this assumption that because for some reason we have nuclear in our submarines to power an engine in the submarine is somehow that we're supporting nuclear fission in our homes, and that it is the same form of nuclear that we would be using, or the same sort of system that we'd be using to power our grid, is absolutely stupid. But there again, Steve Price, he's priceless and relatively stupid. So I just want to take you to this shot, which is a shot of So they asked people a whole lot of questions. This is the Sydney Morning Herald. They asked them a lot of questions about how would you go about, what do you want to subsidise, basically? What sort of power energy sources do you want to subsidise? And this is what they came up with. So rooftop solar, well, that had 45. Nearly half the population thought, that's a bloody good idea, let's subsidise that. Home batteries, A lot of people thought that was a bloody good idea as well. Renewables in general, such as wind and solar, that should be subsidised. But the one that they thought should not be was nuclear. That had a negative response. So for some reason, most people don't want to subsidise nuclear, but they see some benefits, obviously, in subsidising rooftop and solar and so on. Now, I also want to take you to an article in the Sydney Morning Herald, which talks about this issue around energy and refers to Peter Dutton's presser. The energy plan Peter Dutton revealed on Friday morning is even more radical than it appears to be when he announced this year the opposition was embracing nuclear energy. Announcing costings crunched by the coalition by Frontier Economics, Dutton said his plan would allow Australia to get a net zero emissions by 2050 at 44% less in cost than the current government plan, a saving, he said, of $263 billion. This position puts the coalition at odds not just with the government, but with a global effort to reduce emissions by electrifying economies and building renewable energy infrastructure to displace fossil fuels. Dutton also insists the world is engaged in a race towards nuclear. And now, that's totally untrue. In fact, according to the International Energy Association, 14 G20 nations have nuclear energy and 2 are considering it. But even that does not paint a clear picture of the global state of nuclear power. According to the World Nuclear Industry Status Report, which tracks every nuclear plant on Earth from development proposal through decommissioning, the industry is stagnating. Last year, 5 reactors were switched on and 5 were decommissioned. I reckon that's about net zero, in effect. In 2023, nuclear energy share of global electricity generated was 9.15%, a slight decrease from the previous year. The global surge in renewable capacity has been caused by massive cost reductions and the ease and speed of installing the technology. There's another point here I want to look at. Despite the potential of curtailing renewables, Dutton says the plan accords with Australia's global climate commitments because it would still help Australia reach net zero in 2050. This is not strictly true. Even if Australia was able to build nuclear fast enough to meet that target, by keeping coal plants open until nuclear replaced them, Australia would fail to meet its interim targets. But it is the amount of electricity that plans presumes. So this is about how much electricity we will be using by 2050. Australia will need in the future that is radically departs from the path Australia is already on. So what it says is that to transition the economy fast enough to keep in line with Paris Agreement goals to establish the climate, the Albanese government is pursuing the energy model described by grid operator AEMO as a step change scenario. It means emissions fall as Australians swap internal combustion engines for EVs, electrify homes, and develop new energy-intense export industries that could power by electricity, such as green steel and hydrogen. Now, the reality is that Labor believes that they can force the hand of every Australian to behave the more Labor wants them to behave. This is what Dutton is saying, to electrify exactly how Labor wants them to electrify. Ours is realistic, theirs is a fantasy. That's one way of putting it. Another is that Dutton's vision of the energy future looks remarkably like the past. And the reality is that you can't switch nuclear off. So if you build up the amount of nuclear energy in the plants and you have the 7 reactors that he plans to have around Australia, it will mean that there will be less renewables. So somewhere along the line, if he goes ahead with this plan, the building of renewables will decrease. People will not want to invest in renewables because the future for renewables looks murky. So that's the other issue, I think, that we need to consider when we're discussing all of this. And if you like or disagree with, who gives a crap, just subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, and let me know what you think. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.